Continuing with Din of Bar Metzrah, fifth shir on the Din of Bar Metzrah. We're skipping now to Sif Chav Gimel. We'll talk about Chav Gimel, Chav Dalet, Chafei. Chav Gimel and Chafei are monetary considerations that are connected to Bar Metzrah. Chav Dalet is about Harama, which also connects to Sif Yud Ches, which is also Harama. So we'll do Chav Gimel, Chav Dalet, and Chafei today. Chav Gimel discusses when there is something which is not so common today, at least when you see it in Shulchan Aruch, but then afterwards you see that it is relevant. And that is when the Matzrin and the Lekeach both come together to the Moicher. They want to buy the property. And the Lekeach has better coins. Talking about in those days, coins if they were not worn out, maybe if they were gold coins versus silver coins versus other coins, that they were easier to use than the other ones, then, and the Lekeach's coins are better quality, then, or they're easier to use. Yeah, or an example is that the money of the Lekeach is ready to be used, but the money of the Matzrin is in a bag or in a lock, and you have to wait for the guy to open it, then there is no Dina de Bar Metzrah. Why is that? The Smer right away points out to you, in the name of the Tur, that we know that Dina de Bar Metzrah does not apply. Dina de Bar Metzrah is a din of Asisa v'hayoshor v'hatoiv to the Matzrin. Who is responsible for it? The Lekeach. Who is not responsible for it? The Moicher. If Vasisa Hayashav Hatoy for the Matzrin cannot come on the expense of causing a hefset to the Moicher, and since the Moicher is going to get a loss, so to speak, from it, it'll have money that it's hard for him to use, then we're not going to have a Nidra Metzr in such a scenario. So if there is any form of loss to the Moicher, which is what the Ramah says at the end of this, then there's no more Dina de Bar Metzrah. Now, sometimes the coins are the same coins, but just the mere fact that they're in a lock, in a safe, and you have to wait for somebody to open the safe, the Lekeach has to wait, that time of waiting is already enough of a reason that's going to be considered a slight loss to the Moicher, and therefore there's no more Dina de Bar Metzrah. Comes a question, what happens if the Moicher, if it's something that the Moicher doesn't care about, but the rest of the Moicherim in the world would care about? Or it's something that the Moicherim in the world wouldn't care about, and this Moicher does care about it. For example, let's say about Tzrurim v'Chasumim, that they are in a safe, and you have to wait. Most sellers are not going to say, we want to wait until you get it from the safe. What happens if it's sitting in a bank, and the bank is closed? Most sellers are going to understand that today is Thursday, and Monday, banks today, so let's say it's Friday, and the banks are already closed. And Sunday, Shabbos, Sunday, the banks are closed. And Monday, the banks are closed because it's a legal holiday, Lomer Zogan. So you have to wait until Tuesday. Most Moicherim are not going to have an issue with it. You show them proof of funds, you have the money, they're not going to have an issue waiting. What happens if this Moicher is makpid on it? Or on the flip side, most Moicherim don't want money that's locked up in the safe and you don't know when the guy's going to unlock it. And this Moicher doesn't care. Do we go based on the who is makpid? Do we go, is the hakpade on the majority of people being makpid, or is the hakpade specifically on this? Whoever learned Hilchas Nida and Hilchas Chatzitza knows this discussion regarding hakpade in Chatzitza, that the Mechaber holds that you go based on the world, and there are those that disagree with it. But it's not relevant over here. Let's just go over here. The Erech HaShulchan brings in the name of the Rashba. He brings a tshuva from the Rashba. And the words of the Rashba are, Loitiknu ela bema she'ein derech hamoichrim lahakpid. Not that this moicher, but derech hamoichrim lahakpid. even if this specific moicher is not makpid, but derech ha-moichrim la-hakpid, it's mashma from the Rashba that there is no more dina de bar metzra.
What would be the story of that?
Huh?
Can we say
The Chachamim were mesaken certain klolim. Huh?
we say that if he's otherwise he's not, then it's fine.
Yeah, but if it's something which is tzurim v'chasumim l'mashal, yeah, then it's something which he's not makpid, but the rest of the world is makpid. The Rashba goes on the svara. This is Takanas Chachamim. Takanas Chachamim is only what Chachamim were mesaken. Chachamim were mesaken within the din of the bar metzra, a carve out. Din of the bar metzra doesn't apply if you're dealing with a situation that derech ha-moichrim is lahakpid. And we don't care about this specific person. We're not going to start going that every time there's going to be a case of bar metzra, we're going to start having a discussion in Bezdin. Was this moicher yes makpid, not makpid? Drag the moicher into Bezdin and figure out what's going on. He's not part of the case. The question is, does the lekeach have a right or not? That is the question. Chachamim were according to the Rashba, Chachamim were mesaken, and it goes based on the derech ha-moichrim. That's the shitta of the Rashba. That's how the Erech HaShulchan understands it. The Aruch HaShulchan, Sifkat Yud Aleph, his lashon is Lo tiknu matzronus kshe ha-moicher makpid al zeh. That we go based on the moicher. Exactly the opposite of the Rashba. The Mishpat Shalom is medayik from the Beis Yosef on the Tur, that you go after das ha-moicher and not after this specific moicher, not the rest of the moicher. That's how he's medayik. The Mishpat Shalom is medayik that from the Beis Yosef. What will be?
The Rashba says it's both that if like both can go both ways, both.
No, only derech ha-moichrim lahakpid.
No, in other words, derech ha-moichrim not to be makpid, but he says he is makpid.
We don't care about it. This is l'chayir, it's a mashma from the Rashba, we don't care about it. It's takonas chachamim. Takonas chachamim is derech ha-moichrim lahakpid or not? Just because you're.
No, but wouldn't that be nifal what the Rambam says that anything has to be makpid?
He doesn't consider it a hefsid. L'chayir, the Rashba doesn't consider it a hefsid. Well, lav dafka, that waiting is a hefsid according to Rashba. The Mishpat Shalom says you go after das ha-moicher, and he's machriya like that, and he's medayik that from the Beis Yosef. The difference would obviously be if something the moicher is makpid and the velt is not makpid, or something that the velt is makpid and the moicher is not makpid. There will be enough community between the Rashba and the Erech HaShulchan, who is on one team, and the Aruch HaShulchan and the Mishpat Shalom in the name of the Beis Yosef on the other team. Now, the Erech Lechem on the Shulchan Aruch also is actually medayik from the Shulchan Aruch over here, that he adds even more. He says, if the Moicher says, Ani chafetz betzrurim v'chasumim, I dafke want it the other way. Why? Shetoiv lahatzniam, because I'm happy with it, or he dafke wants the ones that are open. It's his choice to decide what it is. That's what the Erech Lechem says. Basically the same as the Beis Yosef. So based on that, it would seem like the majority would go based. The Erech Lechem, the Mishpat Shalom is medayik that from the Beis Yosef. The Erech Lechem himself paskins like that. The Ramah and the Mechaber over here don't seem to imply otherwise, that you go after das, this specific moicher, and anything which is a bother to this moicher, pseid of this moicher, we do not mesake, there's no din of bar metzra. Then the Mechaber continues, the next din, what happens if the lekeach comes and buys the karka first, they didn't come together, then the matzrin has to give him whatever money he gave. Not talking about the price, but the kind. If it's this coins, these coins, trurim, chasumim, whatever it is. That's how the Smeh understands the Mechaber. That it has to be exactly the same that the lekeach gave to the moicher. That's what the matzin has to give the lekeach. And the Smeh adds, ke'ein ma'osav mamash. Exactly the same thing. The Smeh says, Taka, the Tur disagrees with it, and the Tur holds that we don't say that. That the Pseudo de Lekeach is not as extreme as Pseudo de Moicher. Mashe Pseudo de Moicher, the Chacham went to an extreme. By Lekeach, there's no chiyuv of Vasisa Yoshev. By Lekeach, there is a chiyuv of Vasisa Yoshev. So we don't go to the extreme that he has to give him Ke'ein Ma'osav Mamish. And the Smeh says that he already explained in Prisha that the Torah is right, and not the Beis Yosef, and therefore he paskins la halacha that when it comes to Lekech has no right to say, I want this specific money or that specific money. Like the Torah. The Nasivis, in Chidushim Sivkot Nechav Beis, makes a kind of a pshara between the Torah and the Beis Yosef. And he says that Take we paskin like the Beis Yosef, that he has to give him Ke'ein Ma'osav Mamish, but not always. It's only if there is some form of hefsed, im yesh hefsed, k'tzas hefsed. If there's a little bit of a hefsed in the kinds of coins that are being used, that's already enough of a reason to say that the Lekeach could claim, I don't want these lower quality coins than the original coins. But it's not enough to just have a bother from it. That means that Tzrurim v'chasumim, the Nesivis says that the Lekeach doesn't have a right to say, I don't want to wait, because you have the money in a safe. Tzrurim v'chasumim, it's not enough. Just the waiting is not enough of a hefsed. If there is a hefsed in the mois, the coins are less of a value, then it is a problem. What is the asad of the Torah? Why he holds this way, and those that hold that by a moicher we give him more leeway than by a lekeach. We give him more rights. A, because like we said before, there's no chiyuv asisa v'shotev in the moicher, and B, the moicher has no chiyuv to sell. The moicher could say, if it ain't going my way, I'm not selling. So we try to make it as easy as possible for the moicher to fulfill it. A lekeach doesn't have a right to say, if you don't give it to me, you're ois matzra. He has a chiyuv to pass it. Now what happens in countries that are not America, where you have different kinds of currencies? In Eretz Yisrael, you could buy units in dollars. In some other countries where Bechlal they don't do any transactions in the local coins, because at 8 a.m. it's worth one price and at 6 p.m. it's worth a different price. But let's say you talk about Eretz Yisrael, where it's Lefi Erech stable. And a lot of times houses are sold in dollars. And what happens is the Lekeach went and bought it in dollars. Pischei Choshen discusses this. Pischei Choshen, Perek Yud Aleph, Ve'ara Kuf Samach Aleph. Lekeach paid $1 million for a property in Yerushalayim. That's a good deal today. And now, then the price, the value of the dollar versus the shekel changed, for whatever reason it is. It changes, doesn't change drastically, but when you're paying $1 million, it could be a difference, one way or the other. So the Pesach Choshen says, you look in Kesef HaKachim is left in Tzarech Yun. But he says, the Kesef HaKachim is in Tzarech Yun, but if you look in the Minchas Yitzchak, Chelik Zayin, Siman Kuf Chof Daled, he is machliya that you go according to the current price, not according, means you go according to the current value. So if $1 million, when he bought the apartment, was worth 3.5 million shekels, and now it's worth and now $1 million is only could give you 3.3 million shekels, then he has to give him according to the higher value, not according to the lower value. And if it goes up, you also only have to give him, only have to give him according to the value of the dollar today.
Basically paying whatever the house costs.
Whatever the house costs according to the local currency, even if you paid in a different currency. This is asur if it comes in din ribis. But we're not talking about ribis over here. We're talking midin of paying back. If you're not paying back a loan, here's your shliach. So that's why the Minchas Yitzchak goes. But it does become a big issue in ribis if somebody lent money on your behalf and it goes through different currencies, it becomes a whole big halachic headache, which we're not going to get into it now. You want to know about it because I spoke about it 4 years ago. Now, so the Rama concludes, like we said before, that anything is a hefset to the meicher, then there's no dinner debar metzra. Pischei Tshuva brings a shalas Tshuvas Mayim Chaim. The shalas Tshuvas Mayim Chaim is a Pischei Tshuva over here. That there was a Rav which came up with a brilliant idea. Let's figure out, if you want, if the meicher wants to make a harama which works on the lekeach, on the matzah, so the lekeach shouldn't get it. So the meicher should write that if the kinyan is nisbatel, the mekach is nisbatel, then he pays a penalty, which today is standard practice in every house that you buy. You give a down payment, and if the lekeach doesn't close, it's called he loses down payment. Why? Liquidated damages. It's damages that can't be calculated, so therefore the down payment goes back. What happens if it's the other way? What happens if the meicher is the one who doesn't want to close? So he puts into the shtar, if you don't end up getting the house as the deal that we signed, I'll pay you $100,000. And this Rav that the Mayim Chaim quotes said that it works, because now the matzren, if he's going to take the property from the lekeach, is going to trigger $100,000 knas to the meicher. You created a hefset to the meicher, and therefore there is no...
He's going to pay the knas.
Who?
The matzah.
Why should the matzah pay the knas? It's a haram. Yeah?
It's only if he takes it before the sale goes through. Right? It's not if he's not here from the gap. It's only if
he is. That's the Kesef HaKodshim comes and says... That's not because of Kodshim. That's what the Pischei Tshuva, the Mayim Chaim himself, they say it's not so. It's not considered a hefset of the meicher. Why? Because the lekeach is a hakal l'shliach of the matzren. So the moment the lekeach purchased the property, the sale was completed for the person he bought it for the matzren. So it's not that there's two purchases over here. It's not two sections. The meicher sold it to the matzrin via the lekeach as a shliach. So there was no cancellation of the original deal. So the meicher doesn't have to pay any knas. The Kesef HaKodshim disagrees. Kesef HaKodshim says yes, it is enough to be mevatel dina debar metzra, like what the Mayim Chaim disagrees with. And the Kesef HaKodshim says, Elamai, because it's a shaila of harame, we go back to what we learned a few sifim ago, that the matzrin could be mashbia, the lekeach, or the meicher, whoever it is. It was a take harame, there was no harame. And he adds another thing, the Kesef HaKodshim. This only applies if the knas was instituted at the moment of the sale. Not if the knas came later. Let's say the sale was a final sale. And then the next day, they signed a separate paper, a side agreement, that if I lose the property within a certain amount of time, because of you, the meicher, or because of other reason, then the meicher has to give me back a refund of $100,000 as a knas. So he says, then the Kesef HaKodshim says that for sure doesn't work. Because the property already got transferred, the mechira already happened, the matzronis already kicked in, and therefore the lekeach already became the shliach of the matzron, and the knas only showed up later. That's for sure not a problem. Question is, what happens if the knas is not on the meicher, the knas is on the lekeach? Let's say there's a deal that if you're going to, I sell you a property and I make, which is lav dafka legal in America, in New York, that if I tell you that you're not allowed to flip it, or if you flip it, you have to pay me part of the profit, which people put it into contracts, and I think it's illegal.
selling it right away?
Selling it right away for a profit. I sell you a house, here, yeah? And now I don't want to hike up the prices of Crown Heights. I'm against the brokers that are Nishka mentioned. So I don't want to do such a thing. So I make a deal with you. I'm selling you the house for 1.2. market, the price. I could put it in the market and get 1.7. I want the Jew to have a house. But I put him there, if you're going to flip it within whatever, a certain amount of time, then the megach is nifka. Or you have to give me the 60%, 70% of whatever profit you make. I don't want you to do such a thing. I'm selling it to you because I want you to live here, not because I want you to flip it. So there's a knas and a lekeach. So there's a hefsed and a lekeach, we transfer it, right? What's the din in such a scenario? So the chayda, according to the Shulchan Aruch, that, and even according to the Sivis, could be that this knas is not mafkiyah din the bar mitzvah, because by the lekeach we're not masakin the same sort of hefsed as the meicher. Could be according to maybe the matzron would have to pay the knas, or we could just say like the Mayim Chaim, there was never a second transaction. Go to Bezdin, there's never a second transaction. I was a shliach lekech. There's no the knas is never getting triggered over here. Three-way din taita. He didn't sell it. Someone took it from him. There's an interesting marashdam that the Mishpat Shalom brings. Choshen Mishpat סימן Reish Tzadik Tes. Mashur shows marashdam that if there's a issue with the government on this house and the king wants to take it and therefore people don't want to buy it, there's no more dinner de bar mitzvah, because it's like something that has to sell because of a extreme circumstances. The Mishpat Shalom says, I'm not sure if this is lemaise, because the Marashdam had a bunch of other reasons why he was mafkir in the bar mitzvah, not only this specific reason. Now, if the Kesef HaKodshim also mentions, if the seller, another din for the Kesef HaKodshim, if the seller gets a specific tevas hanoah from selling it to this specific lekeach, for example, it's a tevas hanoah, separate thing. He sells to this lekeach. This lekeach has a certain business that he wants to get into. And he knows by him selling this property to this lekeach, he's going to now get a connection to what he has to get done on a separate deal, unrelated to this house, unrelated to this, a separate thing. So the Kesef HaKodshim says it's not enough to be mafkir din de bar mitzvah. But if it's not considered a hefsed enough to mafkir din de bar mitzvah, because the hefsed, the tevas hanoah is not connected specifically to this property. But if the tevas hanoah is connected specifically to this property, I'll give you an example that I thought of. Let's say if a person is next door to him is a person who's a farmer, and he buys a field, and the tevas hanoah that he gets from putting the farmer next to him is now he's going to have somebody who's going to do work, do some work for him, or other things. The tevas hanoah connected directly to it. Not a side tevas hanoah, it's only connected directly to this sale, to this property. Then the Kesef HaKodshim says it could be that if it's directly connected, the din of the bar mitzvah will be mufka. Now, since we're discussing a seller which has a hefsid, what's the din if a seller is a goy? Are we still saying that if there's a pseida, the moicher, there's no din of the bar mitzvah? Now, we know there's no din of the bar mitzvah when you buy from a goy. But let's say it's a certain scenarios when there isn't the bar mitzvah, which we're going to get to when we get to the whole discussion about the goy. So, from the Shas Tshuvas Afkas Reichel that we discussed 2 shiurim ago regarding the guy who had a store and a house and wanted to sell both together, and the Beis Yosef after says, even if you put aside the question of a bar mitzvah from a guy or not, in Afkas Reichel Siman Kuf Yutes, we are worried about a hefsed. If there's a hefsed to the guy who is the seller, it's still considered a hefsed, which is enough to mafkir din of the bar mitzvah, and that's what's also mashma from the Sivis and Siman Reish Lamed Zayin. But the Erech Shai over here in Seif Nun Zayin, on Seif Nun Zayin, there's a long Erech Shai, and he disagrees on the Beis Yosef. He brings that the swear of the Beis Yosef doesn't make sense. The Chachamim were not choishish to a hefsed of a seller who is a goy, and he says Avram also is machriya like that there is no hefsed in We're not choishish to a hefsed of a goy if it becomes relevant to the din of being mafkia, dina de bar metzra. Moving to another din of hefsed. One more nikud of hefsed, and then we'll move to the next sif. You have a house which is sold in the open market or in an auction, and each person makes a higher price, until it goes. The matzrin has a right to then go and buy it from the keich at whatever price the guy paid. However, what happens if the house was for sale first privately, and he tells him, I'm going to charge you 1.5, and the neighbor says, I don't want to pay 1.5, it's not worth 1.5, I want to pay 1.4. Then it becomes a hefsed to the meicher if he's going to sell it for 1.4, right? So the meicher goes and puts it on the open market. Or he loses the property to the bank and he goes in the auction. And now the house gets sold for 1.7, 1.8. Now the matzin already lost his chus because Beshaita, when he was able to do it, he lost it because there would have been a hefsed to the moicher. Now he can't come and say, I want to take it out of the matzah. And those are cases that come up quite often. People want to bargain with the seller, and either they want to give him below market rate, or they want to give him less than that, and the seller's not going for it. And then the house gets sold, and he wakes up and he says, I lost the house next to me, I lost the property next to me, and he wants to pay more. And in such a case, there's no din of the bar metzra. Why? Because there was a hefsed to the meicher, and you waived your bar metzra rights at the beginning when there was a hefsed to the meicher. Then it becomes, according to a lot of poskim, in today's day and age, that you lose your din of the bar metzra.
What if, let's say, the auction was less than one? Let's say you offered his neighbor for 1.5, and the auction was 1.3. It was sold for less than what he offered.
He has to pay him.
I'm saying,
if you say, no, if you lost out on the bar metzra, l'chayra, if you lost out because of hefsed to the meicher, you lost out.
No, but you could say, I was 1.3, I was ready to pay. I wasn't ready to pay 1.5.
We could argue it'll be interesting than Torah then.
What?
It'll be interesting, I don't know. I don't know what the din would be. Didn't think of that. I'm going to go to Sif Chafei, then go back to Sif Chav Dalet. Because Sif Chafei is also connected to money, then we'll go to Sif Chav Dalet. The matzrin doesn't have money in his hands now. Yeah, what does it mean doesn't have money in his hands? It doesn't only mean, in those days everybody had in their safes or under the mattress. It doesn't have bags of cash in those days. Today, it doesn't have money in the bank. Clearly doesn't have money in the bank, or it doesn't have a line of credit to pay for it. That's what Khoshen explains in Perek Yud Samachay. And he says, I'm going to work hard to get money. I'll go get a mortgage. I'll go get a hard money loan. I have a relative who's going to lend money to me. V'chulu v'chulu. We don't wait for him. And he lost his right as a bar metzra. Soon we're going to see how much time you have to wait for it. But if he says, I'm going to go get cash, I'm going to get. So the Mechaber says, if he's a rich person and we know that he has money, two nekudas, we wait for him. But if we don't know that he has money, even though he's rich, that's the implication, we don't wait for him, and he loses his schus. What is this whole din of a rich person? The Mechaber says you have to know that he's rich, and you have to know that he has money. And that's a shit of based on the shit of the Rambam. According to Rashi, you don't have to know that he has money, you just have to know that he's rich. That's the Smeh brings it, Sman Sifkotim and Beis. And he says he should look in the... Just to be rich. It's enough to wait for him. And he says, look in the Drisha, I discussed it further. And the Drisha, he also brings a shit of Rabbeinu Yerucham in between the two, that's in between Rashi and the Rambam. That Rabbeinu Yerucham holds that if you know he's rich, but you have a suffix if he has money or not, then we also wait for him. But according to Mechaber, you have to know that he has money. According to Rashi, you don't have to know that he has money. According to Rabbeinu Yerucham, if it's a suffix, you still wait for him. And the Smeh writes over here that there's a couple nafkaminas of din. He also writes it over there in the Drisha. What's an interesting nafkamina that would come up in such a thing? A guy is not known as a rich person. Smeh doesn't disagree in the Shulchan Aruch. He just says nafkaminas. He leaves it hanging. Let's say somebody who's not known as a rich person, but he says he has. And that's why they didn't wait for him. Or we know he's rich, but we don't know if he has money or not. So we didn't wait for him. And then he went and he came back with the money. They didn't wait for him, and the Bezdin says, done. There's no, you lost your matzronas. And he went, and he traveled, and he came back a few hours later with a suitcase full of cash. Do we say now that retroactively the kinyan of the lekeach is cancelled and he doesn't lose his matzronas, or not? And that would depend on this question. Which shit are we going to follow? Because based on that, the question is, when does he lose his right of matzronas? Because that's the chkir over here. When do you lose your right of matzronas? So, and that depends on what the situation is. If you don't have money, or if you don't know if you have money, or if we don't know if you have money, or if we know you don't have money but you're rich, I don't know how that's possible, but that nekuda, then the question is, when do you lose the din of matzronas? Now, it says you have to wait for him, right? So the Mechaber says, okay, before we go to that, the Prisha also brings another point on the Seif, that if he's not rich,
In other words, not going to be that according to the Mechaber, you would not, you already lost your.
Yeah, now the Prisha mentions that if a person is not rich, the din is we don't wait for him. He says a very interesting thing. Back to the whole discussion, moicher versus lekeach, who's mafsid. He says, this is only if the moicher wasn't selling yet. Because then we say we don't want to have a hefset to the lekeach. To the moicher, I mean. So if he says, if we know that he's not rich, and he says, wait, I'm going to go get cash from the house, and the din is we don't wait. That's only a din if the moicher didn't sell yet. It's a din in the moicher that he shouldn't have a hefset. But if he already sold it to the lekeach, now and the lekeach is in Bezdin now with the matzah, and the matzah says, "Wait for me." The Prisha says this is something that's going to be discussed later in Shulchan Aruch, in the Tur, in Sifan Aleph and Beis, and in Choshen ve'efoids in Mishpat Choshen Sifkot Lamed Zayin. He understands from this Prisha that you do wait longer. You wait if the person is not rich and he says, I'm going to get money, but it's already in the hands of the lekeach does have a chiyuv to wait longer than the meicher. Hamtane, and this fits with what the Smer writes, what we discussed in Sifchav Gimel, that hamtane, which is not a hefsid, hamtane is not a reason for the lekeach to say bar metzra is not considered a hefsid to the lekeach. There's a hefset to the lekeach is one thing, but hamtana is not a hefset to the lekeach. It's a hefset to the meicher, not a hefset to the lekeach. Now, how long do you have to wait? If you do wait,
So the lekeach is smart. He'll make sure to bring the matzah in the basin before the sale happens.
Yeah. Meicher, yeah. How long do you wait? Yeah, it says, how long does the Mechaber say you have to wait? So the Mechaber says? According to the Prish, it's only din in the Meicher. But regardless, how long do you have to wait? What's the din of waiting, if you have to wait? So, when the Prish says you have to wait, just the din is, do you have to wait or you don't have to wait? Not how long. The Mechaber says, until you go home, get the money and come back, right? Which means, simply, if a person lives a little bit further away, if he has his cash in Connecticut, so it'll take New York traffic was 7 hours to go there and back, even though it's only 25 miles away. Or New Jersey in rush hour. Truth is, even to go into Borough Park will also take that amount of time some days. The Pamayne Zav brings the Mahari Ayash, who holds that the minhag is to give 24 hours. You don't start calculating how much traffic is there to go and come back home. And the Pamayne Zav says, no, we don't disagree with the Mechaber, and what the Rav Yehuda Ayash wrote was a minhag in his town to wait 24 hours. The pile today, nobody has cash in the house. We'll wait until as long as it takes to go to the bank and get a wire sent over. That's the amount of time that it takes. Love dafki you could do such a big wire on the phone, depends on the bank. Sometimes you have to call in, sometimes you have to walk, whatever long it takes. If you're able to pull it off right away, then it's right away. If you have to go to the bank, you have to go to the bank. If the bank is closed, you have to wait longer.
Who are you, Maria?
Pamanizov says we don't do that. Pamanizov says you wait as long as it goes to go and come back home. Which from that comes a bigger kula today, that waiting to go home to pick up the cash could become into 3-4 days if you have a bank. If the bank is closed, you can't send a wire on the Mitzvah Shabbos. You can't send a wire on a Sunday. The Mechaber over here concludes that that there is a yesh mishaymer, that if somebody's not rich, but he didn't know that the house is going up for sale, or he knew that the house is for sale but he wasn't told the price, then we still wait for him to go home and come back. The Mechaber says b'loshen yesh mishaymer. The Tzedek Mishpat, Rav Pardo, it's also one of the books, classic books on Choshen Mishpat from a few hundred years ago, says even though the Mechaber writes yesh mishaymer, he hasn't found anybody who's chaylek on it. V'kach hi ha'halacha. Now let's move on to Seif Chav Daled. Now that we're done with the money things, because once we get to Seif Chavav, it's already on issues with on other exceptions to Bar Metzra. Seif Chav Daled is also a non-monetary transaction which waives Bar Metzra. Because now we talked about kinds of money, different currencies, and if you have to wait for the money or not. Seif Chav Daled, it says a person doesn't exchange karka for karka. And the Mechaber adds also karka for soda, karka for kerem, two kinds of properties. That means the matzrin, the moicher gave him this property. That's the matzrona's property. And the lekeach exchanged for the different property he has somewhere else. Then the halacha is there is no din of the bar metzra. And the Rama over here adds that even though there are yesh cholkim on this din, still we pass like the Mechaber. Why is there no din of the bar metzra in such a scenario? The Sma explains. If I have a land and I exchange it with you for another land, people don't give up land unless they're in pressure. Yeah? That means that I have land and you have land and I'm exchanging with you the land is because for me, as a leikeach, your land is now very important to me. It's worth more for me than the land I currently have. So, and he wants dafka this specific land. So if you're going to force him then to give it up for cash, you cause the hefzer of the leikeach. Because he's left without his original land, and he's left without this land. There's no din of bar metzra. Even if the matzrin will tell him, I'll give you a third piece of land, somewhere else, still not enough. Because the fact that he went and exchanged his land shows in the very specific chavivos that he has for this land. And where the choylkim that the Rama says we're not mischashev in them, the Sma points out it's people brought in Tur that if a soda is exchanged for a kerem, for a vineyard, which is more than which is more chashuv than a soda, and then you can't say this din that the bar metzra is cancelled, but the matzrin could just give him a different kerem, an alternative kerem. Interesting, the Choshen ve'efoid in Mishpat Efoid Sifkat Lamed Vav says that being that the Rama's din is based on a suffix, therefore you can't be moitzi from the muchzak with the lekeach, which essentially means this bar metzra is cancelled over here anyways. And the Oitzer HaMishpat says here makes no sense over here. What kind of suffix are we talking about over here? The fact that there's a machlokes between the Rama and the Mechab, within the Tur of two different opinions. One opinion says that if you're machlef asada bekerem, then there is still din of the bar metzra, and the other opinion says if you're machlef sada bekerem, there's no bar metzra. It became a suffix in the matzronas. The matzrin is a matzrin. Oh, the dinim of suffix, the emutzim yad amuchzok, is when there's an etzim suffix on the person if he has a right for matzronas or not. Over here, there's no suffix that he has a right for matzronas. And if it would be a cash deal, he would for sure get it. There's no argument about it. The suffix is whether his kerem is enough to waive it or not. So it's not a suffix on him, it's a suffix on the kerem. How can you say that waives the din of the bar mitzvah, because that becomes a suffix and becomes that you have to go after the muchzuk, and the lokech becomes a muchzuk. She says you can't pass on the choshen beifet. Now, but that's regarding land for land. Now, what happens if it's exchange of property that's not a movable property? Gave him something which is metaltalin or a behemoth. So Mechaber says you calculate how much it's worth, and you give the lekeach the amount of cash, and the matzon takes the field and goes on. And not only that, the lekeach can't tell the matzon, I gave up this kind of property that I gave up 12 cows from with yichus. For this property, I want you to get me 12 cows. Tenli mashe k'moish lokachtis doesn't work. Why? Mechaber says because this whole thing is a haroma. So therefore, you made a haroma, you lekech, you lost out. You lost your 12 cows with yichus, and you lost out on the field, and you walk out with cash, and you figure out what to do with it afterwards. Why is it din of the bar mitzvah? Why is there still din of the bar mitzvah over here? Could be the guy's going to say, we could say the same thing, the land was chaviv alav. That's why he was willing to waive, to give up his 12 cows with yichus to get this piece of land. Why over here we don't say, like before, karka bekarka, that the karka is chaviv alav, and therefore we don't take it out of him because it's upseder lekeach. The Smeh says, no, it's very simple. You could always buy more behemoths, you could always buy more metaltalin. It's just a matter of finding them in the shuk. So therefore lekeach can't say that the sada that he purchased is so precious to him that it will become a hefset for him to be able to get cash instead. The Mishpat Shalom says, I don't understand where the Smeh gets such a thing from. You look later in Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Tzadik Hey. There are certain things that are not motzi b'shuk. It's not a good reason. They're not motzi b'shuk. Certain clothing are not motzi b'shuk. Certain behemoths are not motzi b'shuk. So how could you say that the whole reason why there's no bar mitzvah is because motzi b'shuk will go find a different behemoth with the cash you give him? And the Mishpat Shalom leaves it in Tzarech and says, the question I have in the Smeh, I don't know where he gets it from. And the Erech Shai answers a question of the Mishpat Shalom on the Smeh, and he says, no. There's another place, he was medayik from a Gemara, that when your chavivus is going to cause a hefset to somebody else, there are cases when you can't pull out the chaviv alai card. Why? The chaviv alai card works, he says, usually when you're not causing, when it's a benefit for you, not when you're causing a hefset to somebody else. Which leaves a question why by the first case we still do it. The first case is no question that we don't that we paskin like the Mechaber. On the second case is where he says, well, metaltalin is already not so extreme, but that's the teretz of the Erech Shai. The Avnei Choshen avoids this whole problem. He says it doesn't say clearly that it doesn't hold to the reason of the Smeh. He gives a different reason. He says simply, when a person sells land, why does a person sell land? Land is something which is permanent, because he's mamash dochok, he needs money. It makes no sense that a person is going to sell land for a bunch of cows, for a behemoth, or for a suit. It's clear that it's Adama. So the whole thing doesn't even fall into place. You don't even have to start arguing whether chaviv alai, not chaviv alai. A guy who gives up 12 cows for a piece of land, a guy who gives up his land for 12 cows, is for sure harama. There must be a trick over here. If there's harama, everything goes back and he loses out. Now, the Ulama Mishpat also over here says, goes back into the whole Meicher Lekeach Nekuda that we discussed. He says, what happens? This is only by a Lekeach. A Lekeach who says, regarding the give me what I paid for. A Lekeach who says, I gave 12 cows for this land and I want 12 equal cows. He doesn't get it, he just gets paid. But if the Meicher says to the Matzrim, I'm selling this field for 12 cows. And the lekeach is going to give me 12 cows with yichus. You want the field, you have to give me 12 cows with yichus. We don't say, even according to those that say it's mamash ha'arama, well, in such a case we don't say that. There's no ha'arama with the moicher. We have to say the moicher is a meshugana, but that's not a reason to waive it. The lekeach can't say, Shulchan Aruch says, I give you cash instead of cows. No. You want? You get to pays those 2 cows, pay those 12 cows, according to Ulama Mishpat, and he says it's even according to the Beis Yosef. Now, let's go to another Nakuda. What happens is the same thing we discussed before about in Sifchav Gimel. If you bought with dollars and the dollars went up or went down, what happens if the lekeach gave metaltalin? Yeah, a certain amount of metaltalin. Or he gave the cows, gave 12 cows. And now the value of these 12 cows went up. Cows used to be, let's say, $1,000 a cow. And now there was some kind of magefa between yesterday and today, and the value of these cows with yichus went up to double. And the lekeach says, don't give me the $12,000. I want 12 cows. They're worth 24 today. So from the Kesef HaKachim, when we discussed then, he leaves in the Tzarich Iyun that you can't cause a hefset to lekeach when the value of the coins went up or went down, that you have to pay him more. It's mashma that also over here will be the same thing. He could say, I just lost out 12 cows which are worth 24 grand today. Don't give me $12,000 like it was worth yesterday. I want 12 cows. Or at least I should get the value of today. But the Ohr Sameach on the Rambam and Shchenim Perek Yud Gimel says, no, you receive whatever was the transaction closed at that time. That's when your cows converted into cash value because you're the shliach of the lekeach, of the matzrin. At that point, that's the value that you get, whatever it was then. Same what? Against Kesef. Kesef HaKachim says no, the lekeach could claim a hefset and he could get more. The Kesef HaKachim stays in Tzarich Iyun, he's not sure. The Minchas Yitzchok is machriya, but the Kesef HaKachim seems like he's noited to that. The Kesef HaKachim not here, Kesef HaKachim on the Sifchav Gimel. The Aruch HaShulchan Sifkat and Tezvav discusses also interesting Nekuda, a sidebar story to this Nekuda, to this thing. What happens if the lekeach says, gets the cash from the matzrin, and now he wants his cows back? Does he have a right to go to the moicher and say, I want my cows back, and here's the $12,000? The Aruch HaShulchan says a suffix, not sure. Could be that the lekeach could be koife the moicher to get his cows back and pay him for the cows. It's a side thing. The Mechaber concludes the same. This applies. This same din applies to any harama which the bezdin will see. If the bezdin sees a harama, cancels the koyach of the matzron. And the same thing the Mechaber actually says at the end of Sif Yitches, that any harama that you have, if the bezdin sees a harama, then the koyach of the matzron gets voided. Now you're going to ask me if it's such a thing that there's exchanges. You should know that it's a very common thing, especially in New York. If somebody owns a building in Brooklyn and somebody owns a building in Manhattan, a lot of times the person's going to say, I don't want to sell a building. I'm in the real estate business. I'm not in the cash business. Nothing to do with $10 million in my account. Aside, I'm going to pay taxes. I want to exchange a building for a building. And granted, that's how they got I think they got some buildings that were purchased from Moises here in Crown Heights were done through exchanges. They were able to get other buildings in other places, and that's how they were able to get these buildings. And there weren't Moises that left, or whatever it was, the shuls that didn't want to do it. They had to give us a place, give us an equal place somewhere else. So the exchanges do happen. And there's no din of the Now since we're discussing exchanges and we're discussing loss of a meicher, there's something called a 1031 exchange. You should just know this because it's going to come up. What's a 1031 exchange? It's a code in the IRS. If I own a building, I own a building, and the building, I bought it for $1 million. And now the building is worth $3 million. So then, when I sell it, how much profit did I make? $2 million, right? Now what happens if I took a depreciation every year in the value of the building? I'm not going to go into it, it's not enough time to explain what it is. And now, the building, Klape, the Memshala, is worth 0, and I sold it for 3. I have to pay capital gains tax on $3 million. Something called a 1031 exchange. If within the same year, within the same tax year, you took the money and you bought another building, you don't pay any capital gains tax. So then I sold the building for $3 million. I would have paid capital gains tax on $3 million or $2 million. I went and I took a $3 million and bought another building. Then I don't have to pay any capital gains tax. So what happens? A guy, usually you see all the pressure towards the end of the year. Because people sell buildings and then they try to find a good deal and they don't find a good deal. Comes December and there's a lot of pressure. What am I going to do? I'm going to soon have to pay $10 million of capital gains tax, and people are going to look around buying buildings. A guy sold a building or whatever, has a 1031 exchange that he has to use. So whatever, it's 15 days before the end of the year, and he goes and he's looking for a building, and he buys a building, he buys a property. Yeah, and he uses his 1031 exchange for that. That means when he gets filed, he'll file for it. Comes the master and screaming, I want to take you out of here. I'll pay you what you paid. He says, you're causing me a hefsid that according to my tax bracket, I'm not going to be able to make. I'm not going to be able to sell it for. Your $3 million is going to end up being $1 million for me and $2 million for the government. Causing me a massive hefsid. To the lekeach. Meicher is not part of this issue. So what's it then? Your mom is causing hefsid to the lekeach. So you could say, you could say maybe it's not in the Metzrah. Or you could say, get him a different land that he'll be able to get. Because if he only cares about a 1031 exchange, then either you could tell him there's no Bar Metzrah, or I'll get you, no problem. Next, a few doors down, there's another building for the same price. We'll arrange that you'll get the exchange, and you still won't lose anything. But if he's going to cause him a loss, there's no din of Bar Metzrah. Or the guy could come and say,
Why don't you know
causing a hefsid to the lekech. But the lekech also hefsid. Mamash a hefsid lekech we for sure do say this is you have to pay, or you pay him whatever hefsid he's going to get. And there are other similar hefsedim that could happen when it comes to these kinds of deals, of things that are connected to this. And we'll conclude with one interesting thing that the Vayelaket Yosef over here brings. And I think the Erech Lechem also mentions it in short, that it's also regarding a hefsid and other and loss of Bar Metzrah. The Vayelaket Yosef sticks it here because I think there's no real other place where you could put it in. But it's not directly connected to the Sif. That if a Moicher sold the property to the Lekech, on, let's say, in a Shchedesh Shvat. And it was all done. And the Matzrin wasn't Meiche then. For whatever reason, we don't know why the Matzrin wasn't Meiche. And we waived his rights. 2 months later, the Shchedesh Nissen, 3 months this year, the Shchedesh Nissen, suddenly the government comes back and says, you messed up on the paperwork, the sale never happened. Redo everything. The money was transferred, but the sale was never materialized because whatever reason it was. So now you have to redo the sale. The Matzrin now wakes up and says, the sale is happening now. Shchedesh Sivan. Right? I want to claim Matzrin on this. The Vayelaket Yosef says no. You weren't Meiche the first time. You lost it. There was no Mechira then. It's not enough. The fact that the Mafreya Nisbatel HaMekach was redone doesn't reawaken in you the koyach to claim Bar Metzrah. Once you lost it, you lost it. With that, we finish for today.